Are our souls dependent on heaven's politics? What about hell? What about purgatory? Well, guys, today we're going to be discussing it as we discuss the politics in the TV show Supernatural. We're going to be discussing some of the biggest political storylines and themes throughout the 15 seasons of that show. This could be a long one. Buckle up. This is part of our primarily political episode. I am one of your hosts, Joshua Noel, here with the one, the only, the angelic Christian Ashley. Christian, welcome to your show.
Oh, thank you, Josh. We're so glad to be here.
All right, man. So, what have we been geeking out on lately?
Well, I happened to go to this strange guy's house I know. He invited me in, fed me food, gave me a nice drink, and we happened to watch this mystical thing called Doctor Who and had a blast watching it together.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic, and I thought it was the 2-part finale, and it is a 2-part finale, but only part 1 released. So,
yes,
now we're suffering. Anyway, I've been geeking out on. This is a weird one, but I'm going to share it anyway. Pollinator host plants. So I've been looking up the best hosting plants for some of the pollinators I've seen in my garden. We have a family this year. So the last couple of years, I've had a singular butterfly moth come by, which is a beautiful, wonderful looking creature. Please look it up if you haven't seen one. They're so cool. And this year I was like, oh, there's 2. And then I looked again and there was 2 tiny ones behind the 2 regular sized ones. I was like, oh, I have a family. So then I had to look up what hosting plants they deserve and went and bought those and planted those and kind of reworked some of the garden. Even though it's mostly geared towards butterflies, it now also has a lot of stuff specifically for butterfly moths. No,
Yeah.
Hummingbird moths, sorry.
I got the personal tour. It was a pretty cool place.
Yeah, it's in need of some grooming, but it does the job. All right. So with that, hey guys, if you're listening to this episode or watching on YouTube, however you're consuming it, if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're on your computer, go to Podchaser for us, because this helps us the most of anything. If you go to podchaser.com and rate and review there specifically, that helps a lot with the algorithms. But if you're just on Spotify on your phone, you can always do the 5-star rating. That helps a lot. Or if you're on Apple Podcast, their app also lets you rate and review, and that helps us as well. Again, big thank you to one of our supporters. You can support the show through Captivate, through Apple Podcast, or through Patreon. We want to do a big shout out and thank you to my aunt, Jeannie Mattingly. We love you, Jeannie. All
yes,
right,
we do.
One more time. If you want to see more of our primarily political episodes, there will be a link down below for the whole playlist of these episodes. Let's talk about Supernatural. First thing first, what is your history, Christian, when it comes to this show? And let's start there. Let's just start with what your history of the show is.
I started off watching the show, I want to say season 4 was premiering. It was on TNT at the time as like reruns. And I'd finally gotten this mystical thing called TiVo. And I had used that to catch up on it. So I was just extremely enjoying that. And was like, man, this series is pretty dang good. And like got into the fandom a little bit, and some fandom parts I could take or leave, but just kept coming back to it. And I introduced a co-host of the show, John, to it, and we would watch it together every now and then. Yeah, I just loved up to a certain point this show.
Oh man, I came in right as season 5 started.
Ooh.
And I just started college, the same college. Christian and I and John all went to the same college, but I didn't get introduced from them. I was another friend and listener to our show. You know who you are. Shout out to you. Mysterious. It's like I've been reading the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comics, and like Mr. M, who is that? I should start referring to him as Mr. M. He'll like that. Where was I?
Where were you at?
Oh, yeah. So he introduced me to this, and actually he wrote down a list. Here are the episodes you have to watch to understand the current story. And he said the current story is the apocalypse. And when I first started school, I was still like super conservative Christian. Everything's literal. And one of my favorite things was the end times and the bad guys getting the dragon to come eat them or something. Sorry, I like making fun of my own past beliefs. It's fun.
Yes.
But Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he gave me this, and I caught up on it more or less in like a just a like couple nights, really. The first night, this is when it stood out for me because that first season was really like a lot of like monster of the week, almost horror stories. Like they were scary, some of them. I remember
Mhm.
it being 2 in the morning, me alone in a college dorm. I don't know anybody. Like I don't think I've met Christian yet at this point.
'Kay.
I barely knew Mr. M. Our whole conversation was just this show, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I'm gonna watch this in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. alone," and then boom, there's the Bloody Mary episode, and I'm like,
Oh,
"Why did I make this decision?" I think that's the first time I remember seeing anything that actually genuinely scared me. Because usually, like, jump scares get me, like, I'll jump, but I don't actually get scared, if you know what I mean?
yeah,
That's the first show I remember afterwards being like, "I kind of don't wanna sit alone in the dark right now."
fair.
So that I thought it was really well done. It was fun. Of course, I still went to the bathroom mirror and said Bloody Mary a few times just to be sure.
Okay.
That's how I deal with fear. Face
Confronting
it
it.
head on and see if it'll kill
Yeah.
me. All right. So with that, Christian, can you kind of break down what is the show? What is the premise for those who haven't seen or don't know a ton about it? What is the premise of Supernatural?
Yeah, sure. So, basically, we've got our brothers, Sam and Dean Winchester. Their dad had been what is known as a hunter. That is someone who goes across and all across America or the world and kills like vampires or werewolves, ghouls, anything that would cause problems in the world and kill people. So they kill them before they kill other people. Well, their dad goes missing, and it turns out there's a lot more about their family than they knew. And when Sam was a kid, there was this whole thing with the demon trying to possess him. Well, not possess him in the sense of his soul, but in the sense of gifting him with powers and utilizing him for something he doesn't understand. So the two of them team up despite having problems with one another and go out to try and find out where their dad is.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll go through some of the other stories as we go through. We're going to go through the whole series, highlighting the political themes that we see. But yeah, yeah, that's basically the gist of it. I remember, starting off, and they're looking for their dad, and it's just two guys. And what's beautiful about so if you're on YouTube and you see Christian subtitle that he's wrong about, um, the first five
I'm just being
seasons,
divisive.
the first 5 seasons are the best though, like clearly the best, and that's when it was supposed to end. Was at the end of season 5, and season 5 is the apocalypse story, and you have God's people without God, and then you have the devil's people. And the devil's kind of there, but he's not really show up till towards the end of the storyline. But
Yes,
also, the actor who plays Lucifer was phenomenal.
absolutely.
Yeah, but they have this clear reflection of how Dean and Sam, without their dad, are playing the same parts as Michael and Lucifer without God, where they're trying to say, "What does God want?" And you know what? Screw him. He's not here. Freedom. And what's one thing I really like about this series, it goes through a lot of religions and religious themes and lore and lots of fun things, and it finds a way to mesh some of it in ways that sometimes doesn't make sense, but sometimes it's just really creative and fun, and I think what a lot of people don't realize, because 'cause they're like, "Oh, this isn't exactly what the Christian Bible says." Well, a lot of what they're pulling from is Satanism, and a lot of it is Judaism, and if you're gonna mesh those 3 to come up with a singular story, yeah, it's not gonna be like the Bible story.
Yes. And it should be noted that there's different types of Satanism out there in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that you got your theistic Satanists who actually believe in Satan as like a god figure, and your LaVey Satanists who are the 13-year-olds who never grew up from their edgy phase.
Well, that might be a little harsh because there is a sense of man, I'm gonna get myself in trouble. There's some stuff in Satanism that I do appreciate.
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
It,
even if I obviously don't believe in Satanism.
there's a sense of civic duty there. There's a sense of looking after people and doing no evil towards them. You're kind of living your own life, but it's mired in love of the self, love of humanity versus God.
Well, for me, this is a little bit of a side tangent. Sorry, guys, but for me, there also is this sense of like, hey, wait a minute, God just kind of left us in this really crappy world, and all Lucifer wanted to do in their lore, was more or less kind of break free of God's authoritarian rule.
Mhm.
And they're kind of falling in line with this idea of authoritarianism is bad, and we should all have free will to do what we want. And that's something that I'm like, oh yeah, hey, I'm all for that. But of course, I can get there through Jesus because it is for freedom he set us free. Galatians 5:1, my favorite verse. I've said that 2 days in a row now. This is weird.
Indeed.
I'm creating a theme. USA. You. Oh man. Anyway, so let's jump into some of the storylines. One of the first storylines that the show discussed that is really what pulls you in for me, pulled me in, was the story of the yellow-eyed demon Azazel. And I'm going to break this story down a little bit and try and do it in simple terms, and then let Christian correct me. But more or less, you discover it kind of as you go. It's kind of a mystery. So if you're watching it for the first time, spoilers, etc., are coming. You discover he kind of picked a few different mothers in very similar situations, and he's taking advantage of them. He's saying, "Hey, listen, here's something that's going to happen, but I can make a deal with you as long as you let me give your baby a few drops of my blood." And it seems like just like a weird, like obviously this is a demon making a terrible deal, but these women do it for the love of their family. They end up in a
Mhm.
situation where they feel like they have to agree to this deal. Also, look at if you're on YouTube, look at that guy. They make a deal with that guy. Anyway, um, and they get demon superpowers basically later on, and he's grooming them a lot of the times, hands off grooming, like he's creating situations so that they can become who he wants them to be. And then he sets them kind of up against each other. And in his mind, he's going to have one winner, and he's going to use that to take down Satan's kingdom in hell because he wants to be the ruler of hell.
Mhm. Yeah, that's well stated. It's this whole thing of him using his own means, but also at the same time, kind of also being a team player to a sense of, hey, seals have to be broken along the way. And what I'm doing, yeah, I kind of want to do things my own way, but I also, if that doesn't work out really, then I'm on his side, and he'll look at me and say, "Oh, you set me free," kind of thing. So the different seals, there's like tons of them over the series, but the idea being it can only be done through this kind of hybridization project of introducing demonic powers into the bodies of humans, so that of their own free will, they cause instances that cause immense problems along the way. And he's perfect in that role because he sets them in situations where they have to rely on those abilities, where they have to start utilizing them more. And Sam is like a perfect case since he is the baby that is forced into this project without any say on his part because he's just baby. And then he starts giving into the power a little bit more, starts figuring out, okay, well, maybe I can use these for good, forgetting the source is not the best, and then kind of doing whatever it takes for him to do good in the world by using these powers he knows are obviously bad.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things the show does that part of why I love the first 5 seasons, especially, it takes that Messiah trope and flips it on its head. Instead of
Yeah.
having the main character of, oh, he's specially chosen by God or something like that to save humanity, it is the exact opposite of he's specially chosen by the demons to destroy the world.
Yes.
And living with that as like a good guy who's like, oh, I'm the chosen anti Messiah. What do you do with that? How do you cope with that? Do you use your powers to try and stop the people using you, knowing that using your powers feeding into their schemes? Do you not use the powers and just watch things happen, knowing that you're the key piece? And killing yourself isn't really an option in this world because guess where you're going to go? Straight to hell where they want you.
Yeah. And if people really want you to come back, they let you come back because you got a role to play.
That episode with not Loki, fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, but as far as like the political theme here, this whole idea of like grooming or raising kids up in the way they should go kind of stuff, like a lot of Christians use that kind of language and treat kids that way, and a lot of politics are kind of from a very young age, and especially in social media, they are trying to groom the next generation to be on your side of politics. And that, especially when you consider what Azazel's doing, is a political action. He's not just raising them up because, ooh, let's kill everybody. He's thinking, I can play politics so that if Satan gets free, I'm his right hand man. And if he doesn't, I could just rule hell till he comes back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was very much a political decision, mirroring that whole grooming of children that we do with a lot of social media now. What do you think about that?
Yeah, but I think he's an excellent example of an abuser in that situation. And that abuser can come from multiple places. It can come from the church. It can come from families. It can come from a political entity. And just saying, well, just believe what I say, and then I'm going to include things that I know aren't actually part of my beliefs because they're part of the sins that I want in my own life to get done in the world. And you see it happen all over time. I mean, the easy example would be, Catholic priests and little boys, but that happens in other churches too. It happens to young girls too. It happens to young women, young men. It happens to adults. And it comes from that authority figure who says, trust me. And then he says all these things that are trustworthy. And then he introduces the other things. And you go, well,
Mhm.
I trust him here and I believe him. I look at him as a leader. So maybe what he says here is true too. Or I feel afraid that if I don't, I'll get away from this community that agrees with me, that I am in fellowship with. So he takes advantage of that situation to bring this into being.
Yeah, and that man, yeah, it's a big intersection of church and politics, and I'm gonna do a couple specifics and maybe make some people mad, but that's okay. That's what I do, right? One is exactly what Christian's kind of talking about, of usually young girls, sometimes young boys who are in a youth league group and they're told they have to trust someone and they get put in compromising situations because they feel like if they don't do as they're told, they're being rebellious and that's of the devil.
Mhm.
Um, and then terrible stuff happens to a lot of kids in churches because of that. You also have there's a lot of examples. The other one that might make people up. Well, I got two more that might make people upset. One,
Hooray.
a lot of people, and mind you, I think there's a lot of good intent here, but you know how I am, like anti-utilitarian.
Yes.
It's funny because we recorded with a pragmatism guy the other day, and I was thinking the whole time, like I'm just waiting for you to say something about. Anyway, um,
It's for the greater good, Joshua.
uh, um, but a lot of churches use this narrative of the apocalypse of Revelation, which
Mm.
is exactly what the show is about, and they use it to kind of tell the story of, hey, if you're a bad kid, you're going to burn for eternity, and create children who grow up living in fear so that they won't leave the church. And to me, that's sickening. That's gross. Even if I agree with, hey, I want them to love Jesus, I want them to be Christians, I want them to be in the church. I think using fear to make children grow and to be afraid of leaving is disgusting. For the very same reasons that I have a problem with what we do with social media. Like it's to me, even if I agree with the end outcome, if the practice is the same, I don't like that practice. If kids are constantly on social media seeing about how uh, conservatives are trying to take away women rights all every other page, and of course they're going to grow up being afraid of conservatives. Yeah, that's just gross. Yeah, yeah. So I'm anti-grooming.
I can get behind that.
Yeah, yeah. Just a positive statement. Systematic ecology. We are anti-grooming. So I'm going to use that to just go ahead and jump to our next topic, past the apocalypse. So this is after season 5, when Christian doesn't like things anymore. Um, let's pause there. Actually, let's pause there because
Yeah.
we want to talk about the show too, not just the themes. I love those first 5 seasons. I love the last 4 seasons because it's basically the apocalypse part 2, and it's like the apocalypse. But what if God was the bad guy instead of Satan?
Mhm.
And Satan is still present in those last seasons. He just isn't the bad guy because he didn't create everything with the sole intent of playing with humans and taking away their free will, which is what
Yes.
God in this series does.
Mhm.
Going back to our Satanist stuff. Anyway, um, I think those in between seasons, there's a lot of storylines I just don't love, but there's also a lot of little stories here and there that I'm like, oh, that's good, or little points or episodes. I'm like, oh, I love that. And here's the thing that kills me: my favorite characters get most of their showtime in this part of the show that I'm like, I don't care about this. So
Yes.
we're gonna get to them soon. But Cass and Crowley, we got to break down who these guys are.
Oh, yes.
So they're both technically introduced in season 4 and 5, I think.
Mhm.
Castiel is an angel of the Lord who originally he has a whole long storyline that we couldn't possibly cover here, but he originally comes down with basically no humanity in him. He's just an angel, does not get humans. At one point, he's watching the coyote and the roadrunner, and he's like, "Oh, I get it. This is a metaphor for humanity constantly chasing after God." Just funny stuff. Yeah, he. I was told multiple times in college that I was cast whenever he first showed up on the scene. Even to the extent when I first started drinking, because I had some weird like metabolic issues, and it was just really, really hard for me to get intoxicated at all. So I got to constantly make the joke of I found a liquor store and I drank it. And yeah, just some great characters though. So Castiel is introduced as an angel of the Lord who originally is doing God's work and making the apocalypse come, and more or less goes through his own deconstruction, and he sees, wait a minute, I don't think God really wants us to kill all humans. Something seems wrong here. So he becomes part of Sam and Dean's group of let's stop the apocalypse and let life flourish.
Mhm.
And I personally, my own religious beliefs, I think we love God, but I also think that God supports life and that life is a good thing. We should cause more life and take less life.
Yes.
Just as general concepts. So that's Cass. Cass is hilarious. He's a great character. And especially as he learns to be more human and he kind of takes on traits and he starts understanding references. One of the most like philosophically interesting things is how like angels experience things as a whole. They don't experience parts.
Yes.
So one of my favorite things is like he becomes human for a while and he goes back to being an angel and he's upset because now a peanut butter and jelly just tastes like a peanut butter and jelly. But when he was human, he could taste both the parts and everything interacting. It was like it was so much more beautiful. I just thought I like that.
Yeah.
Demons don't have that same experience. Demons are corrupted human souls. Angels have always been angels. Demons are corrupted human souls in this show, which is theologically wrong, but whatever.
Yes. I don't come to supernatural for my theology. Continue.
Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, corrupted human souls, they go down and they get tortured, all this different stuff, and eventually they either become leaders of hell and rule hell, or they're lackeys.
Yeah.
Different things happen, different power levels based on how many souls you have, how much corruption you've had, how long you've been a demon, whether you were a witch before you became a demon. All these things take different consideration for how powerful demons may or may not be. One of the weaker demons is a crossroads demon. And that is a demon that waits at crossroads to make deals with humans like, hey, you want 10 more years of your life? That's great. Sign here. I'll give you 10 more years. And then here's what I'm going to take at the end. And it's always something awful and includes your soul.
Yes.
Crowley was one of the best negotiators of the crossway demons. So one of the least powers, but a really good negotiator. And after everything that happens with the apocalypse and the power void of hell, somehow negotiates his way into becoming the king of hell, even though he's not even really that powerful.
Yes.
And man, who's the guy who plays him?
Famous
actor, great guy.
Mark Shepard.
Yeah, Mark Shepard. Yeah, he does so great. That character's so nuanced, so interesting, and even to the end of that character. Well, since we're not going to cover it, the end of the character where he actually makes a sacrifice for Sam, Dean, Cass, and it's like, wow, he learned to love even as a demon, and it's a powerful, great moment. Yeah, there's a lot of really good moments in those episodes, in those seasons that weren't so great.
Yes.
Yeah, so Cass and Crowley weren't major players really. Cass started to be at the end of season 5, but it wasn't until this middle section where they start becoming main characters. So now our main characters are basically Sam, Dean, Cass, Crowley, and you can kind of count Robbie, Singer, sort of.
Yeah.
Not the one in The Boys. Same actor though, which is great. So now with that, onto the Leviathans. Christian, would you care to explain this storyline of the Leviathans post-apocalypse?
Okay, so after the events of season 6, where there was a moment where Castiel is trying to become basically the new top angel, and then gets messed with to the extent where he tries to become God himself. Sam and Dean fight against him with Crowley's help, and as a result of everything going wacky there, an opening is kind of breached to the realm of purgatory, where the Leviathans are able to come through. And the Leviathans were beings, if I recall correctly, created by God forever ago, who didn't really match up to his standards. So he put them away in purgatory. Can you clarify on that? It's been a while since I've watched this season.
Yeah, that sounds right. The best I know. Also, I did this out of order. My
Yeah, you
bad.
did.
We're gonna talk about Leviathans before we talk about what happened before. Sorry. Anyway, but yeah. So God created a lot of creatures that he was like, that's not quite right. It's like that scene of Adventure Time where Jake's having Marceline try and draw the things he saw. He's like, oh, that's not right. And then he gives another description, and she draws something. That's not right.
Yeah.
It's like that. God kept doing little markups, and he's like, that's not right. That's not right.
Yes.
And he took all the that's not rights and he threw them into purgatory. So purgatory in this is just the land of the monsters.
Yes.
And now it's broke loose, which turns out that it's not quite as scary as all hell breaking loose, which has already happened, but it's still kind of scary and cool. It's different.
They're still menacing.
Yeah. And I think the way they were able to make it scary, because I think that's the challenge they faced, is how do we make bad guys scary after these characters already beat the devil, the literal devil?
Yes.
And part of how they did that with the Leviathan storyline was how the top Leviathan, named Richard, so that they constantly make he's a dick jokes.
Of course.
And I love them. They're hilarious. But they grow these giant monsters. They eat things. No one knows how to kill them. It turns out it's borax. Cleaning product. There we go.
I mean, why not? They're brand new. You can do whatever the heck you want with them.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we can't just go with salt again or silver. Got to be something new.
Make it unique.
Yeah. I really liked that. I thought it was.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. The Mals are interesting. They can take on different humans' forms to look like different people. So they're kind of like shapeshifter bad guys. Every series has to have a shapeshifter bad guy. What was interesting with them, though, is that they're kind of political bad guys. They took over a company and they're going to learn to rule the world by constantly doing these little political moves rather than Satan's like, I'm going to break the seals and we're going to burn the whole thing down.
Yeah, there goes more like we're going to fatten humanity up, and we're going to do that by introducing these GMOs and stuff like that. They make fun of the turducken at one point in time, and just be like, we'll make them fat and complacent so they're going to taste a lot better when we decide to turn on them.
Yeah. And pretty easy to do in America, it turns out.
Yes.
I thought it was interesting. I do think in some ways political bad guys can be scarier than your monster of the week. Because, the vampires and stuff, cut their head off. All right, we did it. That bad guy's gone. Political bad guys can have the potential to last even after their own death. And there's nothing you can really do about it.
Mm-hmm. The name becomes a rallying cry, or they just get voted back into office when they're still alive. And even when people know, hey, they made a deal with this pharmaceutical company and that ruined this area of the world, or, they've had an affair with a 14-year-old or something like that. And you kind of go, well, why are you still voting for him? Well, we support his policies. It's like,
I even know some people might be willing to vote for a guy after it's been proven that he had paid money to cover up a sex scandal with a porn star. It's crazy.
And that's like one of the least miserable things he's done in the world. Yeah. He's done plenty more that he's not being charged for.
Yet. Yeah. He happened to, he in one case, sorry, I'm not going to get on this, but on one case the judge did say that he was guilty of rape, and it just happened that he was past statute of limitations. And how we're willing to support people. That's the thing, is like, even monsters, it's like we can support them if we like what they're doing. And it's really hard. And I'll speak, personally, like, it's hard to, like, I know Amazon's bad, but man, I can get what I want in 2 days. It's hard not to use Amazon.
Yeah, it's convenient. And they make it convenient based on the suffering of others.
Yeah, and it's one of those, like, how much evil am I willing to tolerate to get what I want, I mean, because all companies have a little bit of evil. That's just how companies work. Walmart is evil, but if I want to get something in Lancaster, it's hard not to go to Walmart. That's pretty much the only place I can go.
Yeah. And it's just that there's no way to practice ethical consumerism in this day and age. As much as I hate to say that out loud, it's extremely hard if you're going to even attempt it. And for me personally, I mean, I do my best not to eat Nestle products, which is immensely hard when you see all the things that Nestle owns. So, and my reasons for doing so being, they utilize child slavery in Africa to get their chocolate crop and stuff like that, and as well, like the bottling of water that causes entire regions to start suffering from droughts and stuff like that. It's like I can't get behind that, but at that same time, there's a company like Amazon that makes their employees stay where they're supposed to be at for hours on end. Does not always pay overtime. Bathroom breaks are monitored, and I still utilize them. So, am I in the wrong?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, also highly recommend watching the new Futurama season, and they do an episode on Mamazon.
I need to watch that season.
We are going to watch that episode after this recording. It's fantastic. I want to throw in a recommendation here. I keep doing this lately. There's a book, Death by Food Pyramid: How the Shoddy Science, Sketchy Politics, and Shady Special Interests Have Ruined Our Health by Denise Minger. And it breaks down how the food pyramid was created and how it was basically told this is not how you should eat. And the government said, yeah, but these guys are going to pay us a lot of money to say this is how we should eat. So they did it.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of proof behind that. And that's basically what the Leviathans are doing. They're saying, wait a minute, if we give people food and add sugar to it, it'll create an addiction where they want more. And then we just got to offer more and more and more, and they'll keep doing it. And if we have cheap enough deals, we can get them to keep coming back and fattening them up, and then we can eat them all. Now, real life, don't have to worry about that eating them all problem. They're just going to take all of your money.
Mm-hmm.
And, you will suffer terrible health problems, which feeds into our health system that also has a lot of bad dealings with our government, and the problem cycles on.
Yeah, as someone who was diagnosed not too long ago with pre-diabetes, that's something I also had to do a major change about it. So I could either stay on the path that I was, where I ate whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, or as someone who can't afford healthcare in America right now, I can make some changes to deny myself certain parts so that I don't end up in that situation.
Wait, did your doctor not write you a prescription for Lizzo?
No, he did not. Not even Ozempic.
That's a South Park reference for those wondering. Oh man, no, but that's it's a scary thing. And also, should I feel bad that I offered you a really sugary punch not that long ago?
I'm on vacation. These don't count.
Oh, perfect. I love those calories.
That's medically provable.
Ah, perfect. All right. So now we're gonna go backwards. We're talking about actually, this goes all throughout after season 5. There's just constantly back and forth the politics of heaven and hell, starting in that season 6 after season 5, where there's kind of a vacancy in heaven. Who's going to fill the vacancy? There's no longer a plan. God's not around to give us a new plan. What do? Angels are all basically robots that are do as they told. Cax being one of the few that's learned about free will and the good parts of humanity. So he wants to step up, but there's other people who want to step up, and he has to win the war against them.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, how do I do that? Well, if you don't know, angels and demons seem to get a lot of their power from how many souls exist in their realm. So he's like, so I just need more souls, more people to go to heaven, you would think. And I think he tried that for a little bit. Crowley's doing the same thing because he realizes he's one of the weaker demons. And all his abilities are just negotiating, so he needs to be more powerful. So he's trying to get more souls to hell. And he has some great politics and how he does that. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but he's constantly doing that. So, but Cass and Crowley make a deal at one point in that season where they're going to basically take the souls of purgatory and use those extra monster souls to give them the power they need to control hell, then win heaven. And then we'll have heaven and hell in our pockets in characters that we like. And it works perfectly. Isn't that right, Christian?
Oh, of course. This whole scenario doesn't certainly sound like a metaphor for the handling of Supernatural after season 5. And that God's gone. We don't know what we're doing. But yeah, it's a brilliant strategy for the system that this series has established. Not so much in any other, theology or anything like that, but for what they have established, it makes sense. So for them to work together, they've worked together before. So this is just Cass just showing he's not really up to the task of being the new God anyways, because that's a very unrighteous action to make this kind of deal that causes more people to suffer, even if it means he would gain more power. So it'd be far better for him to lose in this scenario. But Supernatural happens. The fangirls still love him, so he's got to come back to life eventually. So it works out in the end until it doesn't at the very, very end of the show.
I'm one of those fangirls. I love Cass. He's my favorite, I think. Actually, I should have brought it in here. I have a Funko Pop of Cass with his black wings. It was like a Hot Topic exclusive. It looks so cool.
Wow.
I love Cass. But I did not love him when he was doing this because he was showing the evils of utilitarianism. He was saying, hey, the ends justify the means. If I can control heaven, we can support free will with humans. And that sounds good. And here's exactly why utilitarianism is bad. And in my opinion, it's not morally bad. It's just stupid. It takes a level of arrogance that doesn't make sense because you're trying to say, I know exactly what the outcome will be. So thus this is justified. And you just don't. And in this scenario, it's especially stupid. You're just assuming if I take on these souls, these monster souls, I'll just get power, not thinking that there might be repercussions and there might be a reason that God locked them up. You're like, oh yeah, we're smarter than God. It's fine, no problem. And it's just stupid. It's just stupid.
But was it not good for Sam and Dean to resist the powers of heaven and hell by allying with Castiel and Crowley in seasons 4 and 5? It's for the good of humanity. The ends justify the means.
But the means justify themselves in that case. Like, I don't think the means was wrong. Because I think that's the problem is I never really see Crowley as like a pure bad guy. There was like one season where he was like, oh yeah, he's bad. But like for the most part, he's just trying to exist. Like he's not even trying to like be, and even then like his existence, and we're going to talk some about his well, let's go ahead and talk about his politics with hell now, actually. Of course, one of the best things is he's like, you know what's better torture than just constantly burning and poking and prodding people? Because eventually you just get used to the pain. You never get used to waiting in a DMV line. That's real hell.
Truly, truly evil.
He created the world's longest DMV line and said, this is hell now.
And you don't even get anything at the end. You just go to the back of the line.
Like long term, though, it's like waterboarding. It's like, this is actually long term way more torturous than just getting snapped or whatever. Oh, I love that. But I also love like some of his politics, which is what made him. I'm trying to think of like how I worded it the other day. Cass is a terrible politician and a good person who is a politician. Crowley is a wonderful politician and a terrible person who is a good politician.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah. So if I did this correctly, and instead of doing geeking out at the beginning, we did like name a politician that you think is a good politician.
Oh, yeah.
I would have said Crowley. Because even though he's a bad person, he's a great politician.
Oh, absolutely.
And part of that, what I love too, is he makes the point, we do not lie. He does not allow his demons to lie when making deals. Because he said people will eventually just stop making deals with us. But as long as we're honest, they'll keep making the deals. And that's genius. And that's part of what happens in our politics today, right? Like we get this thing of like, hey, yeah, I'm going to say these terrible things. I might have done terrible things to women, but you know what? I'll get your Supreme Court people. And then they do. Or on the other side, hey, I might be old and losing my mind. I might, push all these agendas you don't like, but I'll keep you from having to hear that guy. And people just kind of go along with it because we know the deal. Mm-hmm. It's when someone, for me, and this is obviously not true for everyone. For me, when someone lies is when I'm like, why would I trust them to vote again? Now, obviously, a lot of people don't feel the same. For me, one of the big ones is Lindsey Graham, the state that I live in, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. He made a statement when Obama was president that they would absolutely never let a last-minute pick for the Supreme Court happen. That's bad taste, and he would never support this if it was his side. 4 years later, the exact same thing happened on his side, and he did support it. So for me, I don't care how much I agree with you. If you're just going to lie about your beliefs, I'm not making that deal. Not voting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that statement.
It's like the Alexander Hamilton play, because if you, man, well, how's it go? Is it like you don't stand for something?
You stand for nothing.
Nope.
I don't remember. I've only seen the play once.
Yeah. No, but it's something about how like they'll support someone because even if I don't agree with him, he stands for something. You don't stand for anything. And
Mm.
that's kind of the thing is like a lot of politicians in our world now, and I think this is why so many people are frustrated, especially in America, is like a lot of our politicians don't stand for anything. They're just, I'm this side, not that side. And they don't really know what their own beliefs are anymore. And if they
Yeah,
do, they backtrack every couple of years.
it's infuriating.
You would never get that with Crowley. Crowley, 2024.
I mean, at this point, you can't go much worse. I mean, I might actually vote third party.
Yeah. So yeah, Crowley, wonderful politician. He keeps hell running smoothly, which is why hell keeps growing in the show. And you're like, I don't like this, but also he does make some good points. Like, how could you take it out on Crowley, act like he's the bad guy when all he's doing is offering someone a deal? He's told them what's going to happen. It's not completely his fault at that point.
Yeah, it's scummy, but at the end of the day, the other person gave their own choice, their own free will to make that deal.
Yeah, it's not like he ever said hell's not that bad or anything. He's just like, oh, you're going to go to hell. But here's the deal.
And he never engineers situations where they have to be the ones to rely on him. It's just no, he's taking advantage of a situation where they're already suffering.
Yeah, yeah. But he's great politician. Cass, on the other hand, doesn't know what he's doing. He just knows that humans deserve free will, and he's afraid of the other side. And that's where he makes some foolish decisions.
He's that idealist turned to the point of, oh, I actually don't know what I'm supposed to do here. I have the idea; it's a good thing to want to change things and to want to make sure people are their free will is respected. But how do I actually maintain that structure?
Yeah, yeah. And when souls are the currency, that's the thing too. It's like what's so interesting, and I think we do see that. Well, hey, we see it right here. What you're talking about, and we see it with Cass and Crowley. They're making the deal so they can have souls, that they can have more power on their end. And we see a lot of that in our world where, we're making deals with different countries because if they're more powerful, it actually makes us more powerful. If something like China or Russia is more powerful, that actually hurts us. That's why it's important that we support Ukraine right now, because if Russia succeeds, that puts all of the other countries at risk for all kinds of terrible things. So even though we're not directly affected, we're indirectly affected by what happens there. So we make those deals, sometimes wise deals, sometimes stupid deals.
Mhm.
But it's important to think of like our global politics in that sense, and that's exactly what Cass and Crowley are doing. Poorly in Cass's case, and smartly in Crowley's case. Crowley even knew when to say, "Yeah, you know what? Actually, I think I'm done here," and walk away.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, Crowley was way smarter than Cass in that season, just in general.
yeah, it doesn't take much.
But currency is a big part of why we make all of our decisions in politics. Whether the currency is money, whether it's just approval, whether it's hey, winning this election will be my get out of jail card. We all have motivations, currency that's really driving all that we're doing. A lot of things right now, what's ironic is that they're treating it in America like the currency is winning the courts. But then we see in reality, no matter how much they try, the courts are kind of just going to make their own decisions.
Yes.
So we're treating something as currency that doesn't turn out in our favor a lot of the time. Kind of like treating souls and not work out in Cass's favor.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So how do you think that was handled as a whole? Like using souls as currency, was it too cold, or did it kind of show it in a way that made sense?
In the rules that they've established, it works. I think it's stupid, but in the rules that they established, I'm okay with it. It's not how I would have done things because I would have ended at season 5 and nothing else would have happened after that. But if you have to continue, if you're chicken with your head cut off, you got to make a story here. This isn't the worst thing they could have done. And utilizing the souls is a good enough metaphor. It's a little too on the nose, but for what they're trying to do, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so then let's move on once more. This time we're going to be talking about some of the Men of Letters stuff. I'm a little hazier on the details. This is one of my least favorite storylines that they did. It makes sense, but I just didn't love the storyline. Do you want to break down like who are the Men of Letters? Where did the British men of letters? How did they get involved? And just like what's happening in the story here.
Yeah. So the general idea being is they're kind of our watcher organization, if you like your Buffy, uh, that they're kind of watching over the influence of the people they have under their command to stop supernatural threats. So the ones killing that vampire nest, or the one preventing that person who made a deal with a demon from causing and wreaking devastation and banishing that demon back to hell. And any other goofy, wacky weirdness that happens along the way, they work to fight against it. And there was a huge divide between America and Britain. Britain was more of every single thing that even dares to think it can bump in the night, we're going to kill it and make sure no one is able to ever do anything else again. The American side was more, well, there's some things out here we don't have to like massacre simply because they are this. Now, some of what the arguments they make in the show, I'm not big on. Vampires, by their very nature, I don't see a good vampire ever being a thing because they have to rely on drinking blood. Blood is life. It's antithetical to everything. But once again, they don't believe the theology I do. So the American side was more, let's handle these problems as they happen. Let's be more reactive versus the British men of letters being more proactive and stopping them before they could be a threat. And then they're over here in Britain. The American men of letters are destroyed. Is it Abaddon that they accidentally summon or something like that? It's of the millions of demons that are put in the show. There's a name. They actually exist in mythology. It's all over the place. So something bad happens there. They get wiped out essentially. And now there are no more American men of letters. It's just American hunters who act independently and may have like a contact network between them.
Also, when they involved Lilith in the storyline, that was fun. Nothing to do with this, but just fun. I like Lilith.
Yeah.
No, I liked the Men of Letters story, and I feel like some of the politics behind this is where maybe we'll disagree the most, maybe not. We'll see, because it very much was like it is. Do we eliminate everything? And I think there's two different discussions you could have. You could have, is there ever justified genocide? Because that is what they were doing. You can also have the story of like, should we have federal systems that make this overseeing proactive decisions to, I mean, let's be real, in England and in this world, supernatural world, they said, what was it, years since the last vampire showed up or something, right? Like it was crazy. Like demons haven't been there in like decades.
Yeah.
And the apocalypse happened and there was just no demons there. Wild. But everything happens in America. That's what I learned from TV and movies.
Of course.
But part of why is because they had that proactive system. Whereas in America, we just have people who are just purely being reactive and they're taking it case by case. And it's almost as if the story is the Federalist versus Libertarian. Do you want just pure case by case, everyone has individual rights and we take it as that? Or do you want, nope, we're going to treat it as a whole, genocide them? I mean, is that how you would structure like the political arguments I just kind of highlighting here?
I mean, pretty much. I mean, it gets into that idea of, is there such a thing as a good vampire? Is there such a thing as a good werewolf or a good demon or something like that? And I would say, unless they are actively fighting themselves and they never give in to their bloodlust or whatever is that thing, then no, there's no such thing as a good one. By their very nature, they fight against humanity and cause harm and devastation, do not preserve life. So the healthier thing to do would be to remove the infection.
Now, if we're living in this world specifically, I would say there has to be good demons. For the very least, without Crowley in charge of hell, all humanity is at risk. With Crowley there, you know that the only people at risk are the ones willing to make the deal. So I would say Crowley is a good demon as far as, you know, what demons have the potential to be.
By the standards of this world, I'll give you that. Standards of our world, not so much.
Yeah, like it's hard trying to play within the rules here. But
yes.
Vampires, you know, I am like, yeah, they can have blood bags, they can have this. Like, I feel like there is ways for vampires to exist and be good, and you know, only hunt bad guys. They could be Dexter, but Dexter's a vampire. I can be okay with. I can get behind the idea of there being good monsters, especially some of the other things that we see take place in supernatural. There are other monsters. Fairies are monsters. Dragons. That I'm like, okay, it's possible some of these can be good.
Mhm,
Seems unlikely. But then it comes to the question of like, hey, I I'm going to debunk the genocide thing. They're not humans. So it's the same thing as if, hey, are we going to completely hunt species of alligators off the planet? My problem with it really is, uh, and I think this is the case in the supernatural show world, whatever, there's an ecosystem that relies on predators existing. So we
mhm.
can't just eliminate them because that actually will be bad for all life. And we need that kind of cycle. But that's how I would treat the supernatural stuff in this world. I don't think it's fair to treat it as if they're saying we're going to kill all the, insert race of humans. That's not what they're doing. They're talking about things that aren't human. So I think it's a different issue than what we normally talk about when we talk about genocide. But I still think it's an issue.
Well, I'd also bring up the point that most of these creatures are sapient in nature. They're able to think and reason for themselves. They have a language, they have thoughts, and they can communicate to the world. So that brings a point of, is there a genocide? To be like the same thing if an alien race came here, like and we wiped them out. Would
Oh
that be
yeah.
a sense of genocide? They're an other. They're not human, but how are we supposed to deal with them? An alien race doesn't necessarily have to be someone that we genocide because they could just be living their lives. They could just be unseen. But if there's a parasitic race of leeches out there that just try and take over humanity, would it not be better to destroy them the moment they landed on this planet and prevent other people, other alien races from being destroyed by them? This would be like the vampires in this situation.
See, so I would fight that because in our real world, there is a reason why that leech evolved to exist. So if we're going to say something from our own planet is killing humans, I think maybe find a way to isolate it from humans, but let it exist because there's probably a reason it exists within the system because that's how evolution or God do. Whether you go with creative design or evolution, it's the same principle fits here.
But it's also they're aberrations to the environment. They're created by Lilith as the mother of all monsters.
Oh,
Who
wait, the leeches?
no. I'm
Okay.
saying in the
Oh,
world of
okay. Okay.
supernatural.
Gotcha. This is hard to do both
Yeah,
conversations.
yeah. Sorry, it's hard to separate this world and that world. Um, in that scenario, they were not originally there. They're not part of
Yeah.
the setup for things.
They were just, yeah. Well, yeah, that's true. I don't know. It's difficult. It is difficult. I do definitely think it's different than genocide, though. But
Yes,
also not just like animals, because as you said, they are sapient. Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. Um, what's easier for me is taking on that idea of is it worth having some people falsely persecuted to prevent all dangers to humans? Or is it better to have a few things falsely persecuted or killed that didn't need to be killed, but also all of the humans are able to live and not get killed by vampires?
ideally, no. I mean, you get into the criminal justice system right now, and there are plenty of people who've been falsely accused of things they never did for various reasons. Some based on racism, some based on, well, we have to have someone we can blame for this, so someone is brought in, and the other people, the DNA evidence was just mixed up in the lab, or the their lawyer wasn't really good, so they got sent to prison for something they didn't do. So in those cases, I would say it is evil that we allow that to happen. We should be better about that. So like, but that doesn't mean the entire criminal justice system has to be destroyed from the top down because other people are being in the spot where they can't live their lives like they should be. So
Yeah.
there's got to be a way of looking at the entire process, then seeing everything that slipped through the cracks and going, okay, we need to be better about that. Let's work on those.
Yeah. It's actually why I like the original America system. I'm going to be very patriotic for a second. I love the idea of a democratic republic that is a republic first and democratic second. Because sometimes people are just too dumb to make their own decisions. So republic over democratic. Um, but that's a whole other discussion. I think the problem is if you're just going to go with like the Federalist and you make one rule fits all, it doesn't fit all. Here's how we can get controversial with Christian Ashley.
Oh boy.
Rules against or for abortion can't be just, in my opinion, doesn't make sense to be unilaterally applied the way that a lot of people seem to want them to be. Because when I say absolutely no abortion, sometimes the woman's life's at stake. Sometimes both are going to die if you don't abort the baby. And it's like, actually, that point just seems kind of dumb for it to be illegal to try and preserve someone's life.
Mhm.
And there's all kinds of like little scenarios like that. And then you get the question of like rape and that kind of stuff. And we probably have differing opinions on some of that, but hopefully everyone agree that there's probably some scenarios where the absolutely no abortion rule maybe just doesn't work. But I
Yeah.
also hope that those on the other side of me who are like pro-choice and all that can see that at some point it does seem a little bit evil if the baby might be born tomorrow. We've known about it this whole time. There's no health issues or anything, and we're going to say, yeah, you know what? Abort the baby. Like at that point, you are just committing murder.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, this is like a side note, but how many Americans are like, oh, I hate America because we have all these abortion laws and this doesn't exist in other countries? The very progressive Europeans would not allow that third trimester abortion that we're talking about. Like they have laws against that.
Yes.
There's just a little bit of common sense, maybe. And I think that's the same thing with the monsters here of like, hey, maybe not, don't kill a vampire who hasn't drank yet and still has the potential to go back to a human. Let's try to save the person before just murdering them.
Yeah. Well, in that scenario, I would work with that vampire and see if it's possible for them not to do it. But if it's proven false in the past, well, too bad, buddy. But when it comes to the issue of abortion itself, I do agree with you in that when you get to the state where both parties are going to die, when mother and baby are both going to die, you cannot have that blanket ban because you are not preserving life in that scenario. And ironically, you are having to terminate life in order to preserve life. I'm not happy about it, but
Yeah.
I am against abortion for rape and incest. It's not that baby's fault. It's not the mother's fault that happens either. That's why we need to have systems in place for counseling and care that doesn't exist in America because that costs money people normally don't have. But I'm against abortion except in that case. And then people go, you make an exception there. Why don't you make it anywhere? It's like, no, my goal is the preservation of life as much as possible. To
Yeah.
allow it to the extent a lot of people want it is to cause a ton of murder that is unconscionable to me.
I also, just for the record, I'm frustrated that we get so hooked up on this debate that we don't try to find the third way out, which is Supernatural and Doctor Who Doctor Who especially is really good at finding that third way. And that's something that I wish we tried for more in our politics, because there are ways that we can take a fertilized egg, remove it, and put it somewhere else that the life is still able to happen without a woman being forced to carry a child to birth that happened because she was raped. Like there are things that we can do that we are just simply unwilling to invest in the technology because of all the politics that get in the way. And that's
Yeah.
incredibly frustrating to me, who's not a politician, who's just a normal person. Like, what if we like life, but also don't want people to be miserable? Yeah. But with the monsters, part of the lore does include when you're turned vampire, before you have drank a human's blood, is still a potential for you to be turned back human.
Mhm.
So I think there's a window where, to me, the way it was described, the British men of letters would say, let's just kill him, not let any chance of it becoming a vampire.
Yeah.
And I think most of your American hunters would have said, what if we try to preserve life and just help it not be a vampire?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm thinking with the Americans on that one.
I would be as well in that specific scenario.
Yeah. It's why I think if we had a federal rule, but then a republic, not where an individual has unilateral power to just make decisions as they see fit, but rather a republic that said, here's what works in our community, here's what we're dealing with, and handling the issues as they come with federal oversight, I think makes a lot of sense. We should create a country that is a democratic republic. We could call it America. USA. USA.
USA.
Anyway,
That's
two more things real quick we want to hit on. I say real quick. This is the end of the last 4 seasons that I also think are fantastic. Starting with the all-powerful Chuck, also known as God.
yes.
I was upset when they revealed that he was actually God. I was fighting. I didn't like it. I still like the story that happens, but I didn't like when they revealed that Chuck was God. I wanted it to be not true.
I liked it as in the early seasons as like a test of the Winchesters. Pretend to be this prophet who just has these visions and has written about their lives, but it's actually God testing them to see if they're able to utilize that free will they've been asking to practice this whole time, and then rewarding them for what they've done instead of being turned into the caricature he is at the end of the show. I preferred the way they looked at God there as someone who is active, just not in the way you think he is.
Yeah, yeah. The original version was a lot more positive about God, but I feel like just given where the story went, it made sense to have a more negative view of God at the end. So what they end up deciding to do. So early season, you see this guy named Chuck. He is a quote prophet, and he's writing things down before they happen. It's like, oh, and it's kind of later revealed that he wasn't a prophet. That was just God,
Yes.
and he was just testing people. And it's like, oh, that's kind of a positive view. But here at the end, what you actually see is the way that God creates is he just writes. And there's all these other dimensions and worlds that he's created and he wrote. And he's like, I don't like that one. So he destroys it, throws it away. And he writes a new story. He's like, that one wasn't so great. Destroys the rest of it, which allows for a lot of really fun fourth wall breaking kind of stuff in the story. Like you get really meta in some of the later season stuff. And I love meta humor and meta analysis kind of stuff. So it's fun for me. But you have this where God's the bad guy. He just wants everything according to his story. And then when you really think about it, and this goes to a lot of like Tom Ward theology kind of stuff of, wait a minute, you're saying there's an all powerful God who could see all futures, and he's making Sam and Dean go through all this crap. They die over and over and over. They lose their mom, they lose their dad, they lose their friend, they lose Cax, they lose Crowley. And God just wrote all this and made it happen. I think they have every right in this universe to be pissed off.
Mm-hmm. But at that same time, they've been allowed to make their own choices. God has written it, but they're in charge of what they've done. The people who did those evil things were in charge of what they've done. No free will is taken away from them, stripped away. Yet the events were brought to where this is going to happen. Yet it came as a result of both this being a predestined thing and people deciding to do this thing. So that there's plenty of blame to go around in this specific scenario versus how I look at things, which I mix predestination and free will. I'm one of those freaks who believes in both and somehow they work together. Don't ask me to explain the metaphysics of it.
And I think that's part of the problem is like the show tries to show both. Like you have free will, but also God's in control and he knows everything that's going to happen. And the metaphysics of that don't work. And the only reason they're able to pull it off, in my opinion, is because of how meta the show gets, where they basically look at the camera and say, this doesn't work, does it? And then they just kind of shrug it off and go along with the story anyway, which I appreciate. I enjoy that they didn't treat us like idiots who just don't understand how it works. They didn't spoon feed it to us. They just kind of said, hey, here's a concept of God that doesn't quite make sense, but it's what we need for the story. So just roll with it, guy. And I thought it was interesting, mainly because God as an antagonist was interesting. The creator of all things as an antagonist, the story writer, the one who wrote the plot. And of course, they make jokes of like, they even make jokes about that plot with the Leviathans. That was a doozy.
Yep.
Yeah, I love all that. I thought it was interesting. But it does bring again that authoritarian kind of argument that of like, is God just someone out there who's controlling all things? And do we even want that kind of thing of like our politics, monarchy? Do we want just someone who's going to tell us what to do and we all just play our role and that's it?
Well, we don't by nature because we're rebellious by nature. And if anyone in the entire universe has the right to say, this is how things are done, it's the one who made it. It's the one who formed it, who made the established scientific rules for how things happen and makes the rules for when supernatural events happen that supersede it. He's the only one who's possible of giving that power. So as much as I don't like what they do with Chuck in the other seasons, I think it's just written in a typical Hollywood way of we just can't have that person who is in charge because then there's someone in charge of me and I can't live in that world.
I see where you're coming from. I don't agree, but I see where you're coming from. For me, I do find it interesting, mostly because, like, theologically, we're very different on this. Where I
No.
think there is a reason that God created us so that we don't have a desire for authoritarian rule, that we do have a desire for freedom. I think we were created for freedom's sake. And we took that away when we sinned and we shackled ourselves to sin. And then we shackled ourselves to sinful politics, sinful systems, and we bogged ourselves down with all these terrible rules. And I think that is part of God's message in the gospel is that, hey, you don't have to be a slave to those things. You can be free. And in a relationship with God that is actually technically open and relational, where you're open to God and you're relating with him and able to live life in a meaningful way where you interact with God. And I think that's actually really impactful. And I think it says something in the story that aligned with my theology that, hey, that God that rules over, tells everyone what to do, and is not open to relationships and just looks at humans as a fun little story. I hate that God too. I don't believe in that God. The God that I believe in is one who is loving and wants relationships with his people. That is not the God of the series. The God of this series, in my opinion, is the God that a lot of people who just go to church on Sunday and don't actually examine their faith is who they think God is. And that version of God, I'm okay with him being the bad
Oh, absolutely. This version of God doesn't exist. And
guy.
I'm much more grateful for that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So lining that up, you have Jack, who is Lucifer's son, and Nephilim are more powerful than the angels. So he is the first being who's possibly powerful enough to take on God, eventually does take God's place. And the whole point of it is going back to a long running thing within the show. They have this hashtag that they used all over social media, all over the place. And it was something that people put on their cars. Supernatural fans had it just on their laptop everywhere, was that hashtag Team Free Will.
Mhm.
And I think they even say Team Free Will one point in the show. And that's where our characters, good or bad, the ones that we cheer for are, Sam, Dean, Cass, Crowley, Jack, sometimes even Lucifer, who, rather than wanting oppression because God is good and we want to be oppressed by something good, as opposed to being oppressed by something evil, said, just screw oppression altogether, free will. So you get hashtag free will. And when Jack takes over, that's what he does. He lets humans be free. All right, what are your takes on this and how you feel they handle the free will aspect?
Well, I'd say by definition, good can never oppress. So in this scenario, that doesn't make sense. But once again, I know what I'm dealing with in supernatural. But when it comes to sorry, what was your initial question again? I'm
Good
getting
question.
old.
The biggest ongoing theme, I'm just going to read off the outline. The biggest ongoing theme of this show is that free will is better than playing the role society gives us or the role that church gives us, the role that God gives us, whatever. Free will is a greater virtue than any role or authoritative, oppression. So, do you think that the show handles this well? Let's start with that.
Okay. But when it comes specifically to Jack as God, it's like a deist wet dream. It's Thomas Jefferson could come back to life with his Jefferson Bible and watch
Oh God,
Supernatural. He'd go, "That's exactly right." And there are plenty of other problems I have with Jefferson besides his theology and religion. But
enough
so
of the
we'll
French.
just start. Yeah. So I disagree with that as a premise. A God who's not active at all might as well not exist
Hmm.
and not involved with his people, the things that he's created, or in this process, the ones that he's taking over for. So
Mhm.
I fundamentally disagree with that. But when it comes to the church being authoritarian, it once again comes to there are rules, there are things in place, there are things that need to be followed, and God is the only one who can set those. So when he says it, yes, but when the church tries to interpret what he says, that's where the issue comes up because you've got perfect God, imperfect people trying to emulate God, and
Mhm.
that causes issues. Well, does that mean, uh, you know, can this person be allowed? Can we introduce this person back into the fold, even though they're doing this or that? And you're going to have wildly different answers depending on what denomination you're in or what actual church you're in, what part of the world you're in. And there needs to be some kind of standard for how that is done. But given that we are people are flawed, our understanding can only go so far. We're not God. We're never gonna be. You end up with problems, and you have people who are too free for their own good. You have people too authoritarian for it, and you have people who try to do better, and something happens that breaks up your job. We live in an imperfect world under an imperfect system made by humans, inspired by God, that will never get perfect. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to fight for it.
Yeah. So I think the show is trying to make a point, and I think it uses a logical fallacy in the point that it makes. Now, mind you, I still like the show, but it tries to set up where you either are under this authoritative God who says, you do the right things and don't do the wrong things, you'll go to heaven and not hell. And that is the version of God that even a lot of our people who go to church every Sunday who call themselves Christian, that is the version of God that they believe. He doesn't exist, but that's who they believe. They believe there's a God up high who's like, if you lie, going to hell. But if you're good, you don't steal from others, and you read your Bible once a year, that's good enough. We'll let you into heaven. They think of it almost like a point system.
Yeah.
They set up a false dichotomy, which is a logical fallacy of you either believe in that God or you can believe in free will where humans can do what they want. And that's it. Those are the options in the show. I want to present a third option. So what they give us is either transactional God or complete free will and no God, or no God involvement. I want to talk about a transformational God, a God who believes in relationship, who believes in changing the heart, who does not care about if you're doing XYZ or not doing ABC. He cares, where's your heart? Do you love him? Do you love your neighbor? And when you're in relationship, it is not complete free will, do whatever you want. And it's also not, here's the rules, do them and you'll be fine. There's rules and you're fine. That's not a relationship. That's just a dictator. Do what you want. That's not a relationship either. Now, I know a lot of people go, well, real love, that's what it is if you let people do what you want. Try being married and then telling your spouse, oh, hey, I'm going to go sleep with this other person. Come on. That's, hey, you don't have free will if you're not able to do what you want. But also, that's not love. Love has rules, and a lot of times they're unspoken rules, and the rules that you want to follow. But love is a commitment, and what God wants is that committed love, where you're interacting with Him, you're in a relationship. You're not following rules because this is what God says to get into heaven, but you're in a real relationship with Him. That's not just free will, do what you want, but isn't transactional either. It's transformational.
I can get behind some of that.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah. It's just the idea is there are absolutes, and God is the one who establishes the absolutes. Where He says, "Do this, don't do that." Yeah, I should absolutely not do the things He says not to do. But at that same time, when I do those things He says not to do, He doesn't look at me and say, "Well, I know you gave your life to me. You repented a while ago, but it's cut off, is gone now. Like your salvation is just something that can just be wishy-washy." It's like, that's not how He works. And that's not what we were saying. But in the sense of who He is, how He acts, I need to follow what He has to say. I need to look after what He has to say. And then when I screw up because I'm imperfect, I don't just go, well, they're doing this over here, look at them, or my sin's not as great as what's happening over there. I need to come and repent and say I'm wrong and follow the rules of the relationship to come back to Him without getting down on myself.
I agree with the relationship bit and disagree with the absolute bit. But
imagine that.
Yeah. Well, so for example, I think in general, God doesn't want us to lie because I think lying generally hurts our relationship with God and hurts our relationship with others. But when Rahab is asked where the spies in Jericho are, I think God really approved and even blessed her because she lied about where they were. So I think that do not lie rule seems to not be completely absolute. There seems to be some scenarios where God's okay with it.
Yeah, but it's lying done to preserve life, which is a greater rule, to love your neighbor as yourself.
I don't know, man. I'm just not behind the absolute thing.
I know. And that's why you're absolutely wrong.
But I'm with you on the relationship thing. And I think that can carry into our politics, right? Like in this system, we have like heaven and hell, who's going to win and who's going to rule heaven, who's going to rule hell. how is humanity going to exist? Is it going to exist under an authoritative God or under free will? And these are like the politics of heaven and hell and supernatural. In our own
Yes.
politics, in our own world, I think there are similar principles. We can have this transactional. Do we have rules for everyone? Do we have this, or do we have a transformational political system? Like I think it is possible to have a system where we're saying, kind of like the what am I trying to think of? It's not the Commonwealth. The Josh, edit this out. No, but you can have transformational politics in the sense of like we can have politics that are how do we best preserve life? And when it comes with politics, by definition, you're going to create rules. But rather having rules like I'm going to go back to our abortion thing of no abortion or yay abortion, we can have rules that say here are some circumstances where we think it makes sense. Here are some circumstances where we don't make sense. Then, and here's the important part of the law to me that I think would be the best. When it does or does not make sense, we will allow the doctors and mothers to be the ones to decide and kind of define terms here. Because a lot of the times it's like, we're going to take this up to the courts to define terms and do all this stuff. And by the time we've made the decision on what part of the law this fell under, because no case is the same. There's always going to be times where we're like, we're not sure if this falls under the law or not. We see this a lot in Texas right now. By the time they make the decision, the baby's either born or dead. So I think we need to have that transformational aspect of, hey, let's trust our experts, the doctors and mothers. Mothers are experts of being moms, you know. So I think there has to be this transformational thing of like we're letting people make some of the decisions on the ground because we trust people. Yeah. Christian, what are your thoughts?
I can get behind some of what you're saying because there are some things in this world where we live in an imperfect world where you have the general idea death bad. We shouldn't be murdering anyone. So you get to the idea of abortion. Is that death? Is that murder? And I'm going to say yes until it comes to the point of you have to choose between the two. Or maybe there isn't a choice. And if the baby is born, both die. And there's really nothing you can do. So you've got to be able to take things case by case and have things in place so that when this happens, no one gets tried for something they didn't do wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And then while we're going to get controversial, one of the other things that happens a lot, especially to cake decorators and website designers, people intentionally try to word things and keep going to the same person over and over and over until something happens. They go, oh, someone prejudiced against me. Now I can take this case to the courts. And I think partially, our laws should be set up where we could say, hey, wait a minute, that was just someone trying to play gotcha. Let's ignore it.
Yes.
And I know that's hard to do, but if we could find a system where we can ignore the gotchas, that would be great. But also, it is important that we think of like free speech and we talk about these things. But I think we shouldn't set it up to where someone's able to just do a gotcha, then we take it up to the courts. Rather, let's have the discussion as humans to humans rather than trying to go to the courts and get someone banned or, all this silly nonsense people keep doing. Public forums are a thing for a reason. We can use social media and stuff well to have meaningful conversations instead of just, I'm going to play gotcha, then take it to the courts, and then they're going to get you. Come on, guys.
It's just skeevy.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of scheming, like that is why we value free speech in our country, in America, is so that we can have these conversations and public opinion can be just as powerful as the law. There are a lot of free speech. There's a lot of speech that I think should be free to be said. You should be free to go out and talk up why you believe in Nazis. But also, public opinion should be such that we can ignore that person and think, hey, that's dumb. And that's just as much punishment of the law without compromising our values of free speech.
The free speech to say something as divisive as that does not remove you from the repercussions of you saying that thing.
Yeah. And there doesn't need to be legal repercussions. There can just be repercussions because, hey, what if other humans in our community don't suck that much?
Yeah. Well, now that you've publicly outed yourself as this, now I know never to join you when you say to do something or never to listen to you again.
Yeah. Even if you're part of a business, I can say, you know what? I don't have to support that business. I can be glad they have the free speech to say what they want and never step foot in their shop.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. So do you have anything else you want to add about the politics of heaven and hell?
No, I'm good. This was fun. A lot of fun.
Do you think Who We Vote For 2024 is going to cost our soul?
Cost us our soul. As the American people, yes. Our actual souls, no.
All right. Well, guys, with that, we're going to start wrapping this up. Stick around for a bonus question if you want, and we'll ask what would have happened. I don't remember what season it is, but Lucifer becomes president of the United States for a little while because, demons can possess people. It's a thing.
Yes.
And what if he would have stayed president and raised Jack, his son, in the White House? What would have happened differently in the show? That's what we're going to talk about. It's a little bit of a what if, but it's going to be fun. If you want a full episode on it, go to Facebook and let us know because we do vote on what ifs every other month or so. With that, we're going to go ahead, instead of giving a recommendation, we're going to, since I mentioned mine earlier, for my good politician, I'll let you choose a good and a bad politician to uplift Christian.
Oh, goodness gracious. This is what I get for working with you, for never being prepared for anything. It's going to look like this. And in my head, I'm going, what? Aren't the political episodes supposed to be different questions? And I said, well, maybe he knows what he's doing. Turns out that's not the case. And it's never the case. And I fall for it every time. I'm saying that as I'm struggling to think of politicians to actually answer this question. Good and bad. I'll go good. I used Legend of the Galactic Heroes before, but I'll do it again. Yang Winley is one of our primary characters there on the more democratic kind of things. The big thing for that universe is authoritarianism versus democracy. And are these two things good? And he's an admiral who people are like, hey, if you became a politician, you could change things. And he knows if I go into this realm, I'm not going to be able to affect things the same way. I may even fall for the things that I'm actively fighting against. So I love him as an agent in that show of I can't allow myself to go to that power because I know how it corrupts people. I guess since I brought the same series, I wasn't prepared for this. I'll go and up Job Trunick, who is kind of like his adversary on the democracy side of things, who is a bad agent within the government, utilizing things and supporting things that keep him in power versus actually caring about the people under his command.
I'll do two more. Because I'm amazed. No one has said for good politician to uplift. No one said Ben Cisco yet. What is wrong with us?
Oh,
man, the way that he's able to speak into all of these different cultures and stuff that are interacting and different religions and stuff and find a way to make peace. Oh, God, great. Fantastic character.
Okay. You won some of my respect back.
For bad politician. Oh, I had one and then I forgot it. Man, I was so excited.
If only someone could have prepared for this. And they could have written it down, maybe.
I don't write things down. You know better than that. Oh, man. I had such a good pick, though, for bad one.
What was it in? What was the media?
That's what I'm trying to remember.
Video game, movie.
No, I just paused the recording. I'm waiting to that. My bad pick. I'm going to make some people mad. Great person, great character, great real person, someone I love and admire. King David. Terrible politician. He was a great warrior, a great man of God. But let's be real. The reason that Israel split into two was because of his poor leadership. Just not a good politician.
Yeah, okay. I can get behind that.
All right. I thought I was going to lose him again.
No, I don't lionize David. David's my favorite character in the Bible, but I also appreciate him for all his flaws.
Yeah, I like him a lot too because he reminds me of me where a lot of the times I'm reading stuff and it's like, I feel like David doesn't know how to adult either. Oh, man. Anyway, with that, hey guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're on your computer, please go to Podchaser, leave us a rate and review there. That helps. If you're on your phone, though, Spotify podcast enables for you to rate, review, or give us 5 stars. Again, big thanks to our supporter, Jeannie Mattingly. You rock. And check out the rest of our primarily political episodes in the link down below. And remember, we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests. Did you know that I also forgot to use the right background for this?